In the ancient kingdom of Valenhall, where tradition runs deeper than the mountain rivers and royal bloodlines trace back 1,000 years, an unprecedented event is about to unfold that will shake the very foundations of monarchy itself. For the first time in the realm's storied history, a king will voluntarily transfer his crown not to his heir, but to his daughter-in-law, breaking centuries of established succession. As palace bells ring across the capital city of Astoria, whispers fill the cobblestone streets about what this dramatic shift means for the future of their beloved kingdom. Some call it progress, others call it revolution, but everyone knows that after today, nothing will ever be the same again. The morning mist hung low over the ancient castle of Valenhall, as King Edmund Thorne stood at his chamber window, watching the sun rise over his kingdom for what would be one of his final times as sovereign. At 73, his weathered hands trembled slightly as he held the ornate letter that had arrived just hours before dawn, bearing the seal of the High Council. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back now. Edmund had ruled Valenhall for 42 years, guiding the kingdom through wars, famines, and periods of unprecedented prosperity. His reign had been marked by wisdom and compassion, earning him the devotion of his people and the respect of neighboring kingdoms. But recent months had brought troubling news from the royal physicians about his declining health, and the weight of the crown had begun to feel heavier than the gold and jewels from which it was forged. The king's son, Prince William Thorne, had always been destined for the throne. At 45, William possessed all the qualities expected of a future king: intelligence, courage, and a deep love for Valenhall. However, fate had dealt the royal family an unexpected hand when William was diagnosed with a rare neurological condition that, while not life-threatening, would make the demanding responsibilities of kingship increasingly difficult to manage. It was during this crisis that an extraordinary solution emerged, one that would challenge every tradition the kingdom held sacred. Princess Catherine Aldridge Thorne, William's wife of 15 years, had proven herself to be not just a beloved member of the royal family, but a natural leader whose intelligence and diplomatic skills had caught the attention of the High Council, the noble houses, and the common people alike. Catherine had not been born into royalty. The daughter of a successful merchant family from the coastal province of Meredith, she had met Prince William during a trade negotiation, where her sharp mind and gracious manner had impressed the entire royal delegation. Their courtship had been a fairy tale that captured the kingdom's imagination, and their marriage had been celebrated as a union that bridged the gap between nobility and the merchant class. Over the years, Catherine had transformed from a nervous young bride into a confident princess who championed causes close to her heart. She had established schools in remote villages, negotiated trade agreements that brought prosperity to struggling regions, and served as an unofficial ambassador to neighboring kingdoms. Her work had not gone unnoticed by King Edmund, who had begun to see in his daughter-in-law the qualities that would serve Valenhall well in the changing times ahead. The morning of the announcement found the royal family gathered in the blue drawing room, a chamber that had hosted countless important conversations throughout the castle's history. Prince William sat beside his wife, his hand gently clasping hers as they faced the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Despite his condition, William's eyes held determination rather than defeat. He had spent sleepless nights grappling with the decision, but ultimately, his love for Valenhall outweighed his personal ambitions. Princess Catherine, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown of deep blue silk, appeared calm despite the storm of emotions surely raging within her. At 38, she had never imagined that she would one day wear the crown of Valenhall, but the events of recent months had prepared her for this moment. She had spent countless hours with the kingdom's advisors, learning about trade policies, military strategies, and the complex web of relationships that kept Valenhall stable and prosperous. King Edmund cleared his throat, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect for over 4 decades. The decision they were about to announce would require careful explanation, as it challenged the fundamental laws of succession that had governed Valenhall since its founding. The kingdom's constitution allowed for extraordinary circumstances to alter the line of succession, but such provisions had never been invoked in living memory. The royal secretary, Master Geoffrey Blackwood, a man whose family had served the crown for 3 generations, entered the room carrying the official documents that would formalize the transfer of power. His usually composed demeanor showed signs of the stress that had consumed the palace staff as they worked to ensure that every legal requirement was met. The process had required approval from the High Council, the blessing of the kingdom's religious leaders, and most importantly, the consent of Prince William himself. As the family prepared to face the public announcement, Catherine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 15 years ago, she had been a merchant's daughter, with dreams of expanding her family's business across the kingdom. Today, she stood on the threshold of becoming the first queen regnant in Valenhall's history, a responsibility that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The great bells of Astoria Cathedral began to ring, their deep tones echoing across the city and signaling to the people that important news was forthcoming. In homes and shops throughout the capital, citizens paused in their daily activities, knowing that the unusual morning summons to the castle courtyard meant that their lives were about to change in some significant way. Prince William rose from his chair, moving to stand behind his wife as she remained seated, a gesture that would soon take on profound symbolic meaning. His condition had progressed slowly but noticeably over the past year, affecting his coordination and speech in ways that would make public appearances increasingly challenging. Yet his mind remained sharp, and his commitment to Valenhall's welfare had only grown stronger as he faced his limitations. The doors to the blue drawing room opened, and Master Blackwood announced that it was time. The royal family would proceed to the grand balcony, where King Edmund would address the assembled crowd and reveal the extraordinary decision that would reshape Valenhall's future. As they walked through the castle's ancient corridors, past portraits of kings and queens who had ruled for centuries, Catherine felt the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. The crowd gathered in the courtyard below represented every corner of Valenhall society. Nobles in their finest attire stood alongside merchants, craftsmen, and farmers who had travelled from distant provinces to witness what they sensed would be a historic moment. The air buzzed with speculation and nervous energy as people strained to catch a glimpse of their royal family. King Edmund stepped forward to address his people for one of the last times as their sovereign, his voice strong despite his age and the emotional weight of the moment. The great courtyard of Castle Valenhall had never seen such a gathering. As King Edmund appeared on the grand balcony, a hush fell over the thousands of citizens who had assembled below. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones, and the royal banners fluttered gently in the autumn breeze as the king prepared to deliver news that would echo through the ages. "My beloved people of Valenhall," King Edmund began, his voice carrying across the courtyard with the authority of 4 decades of rule. "Today marks a new chapter in our kingdom's proud history, one that will require courage, wisdom, and unity as we face the future together." The crowd leaned forward, hanging on every word. Rumours had been circulating for weeks about the king's health and strange meetings between royal advisors and representatives from neighbouring kingdoms. Some had speculated about potential conflicts, while others wondered if new trade agreements were being negotiated. None had imagined the truth that was about to be revealed. Behind the king, Princess Catherine stood with remarkable composure, though those who knew her well could see the slight tremor in her hands as she clasped them before her. Prince William remained close beside her, his presence serving as both support and symbol of the unprecedented decision that was about to be announced. King Edmund continued his address, explaining the careful consideration that had gone into the decision and the legal framework that made such an extraordinary transfer of power possible. He spoke of Prince William's noble character and his selfless decision to step aside for the good of the kingdom, words that brought visible emotion to the prince's face as he struggled to maintain his composure. When the king finally announced that Princess Catherine would ascend to the throne, the initial silence was deafening. The crowd seemed unable to process what they had just heard, as if the words themselves were too revolutionary to comprehend. Then, slowly, murmurs began to ripple through the assembly, growing into animated discussions as people tried to understand what this meant for their kingdom. The reaction was mixed but not hostile. Many of the common people had grown to love Princess Catherine through her charitable work and genuine concern for their welfare. The merchant class saw her elevation as validation of their own importance in Valenhall society. However, some of the older nobles exchanged worried glances, concerned about the precedent being set and the potential challenges to traditional authority structures. Master Geoffrey Blackwood stepped forward to read the formal proclamation, his voice steady despite the historic nature of the document he held. The legal language was complex, but the meaning was clear. Princess Catherine Elizabeth Aldrich Thorne would be crowned Queen Regnant of Valenhall within the month, with all the powers and responsibilities traditionally held by kings. As the official announcement concluded, Princess Catherine took her first steps forward as the future queen. Her voice, when she finally spoke to her future subjects, was clear and confident, though she later admitted that her heart was beating so rapidly she feared it might be audible to the entire crowd. "People of Valenhall," she began, "I am deeply humbled by the trust that has been placed in me. I did not seek this crown, but I accept it with the full knowledge of the enormous responsibility it represents. I pledge to serve you with the same dedication and wisdom that King Edmund has shown for over 4 decades. Her words were carefully chosen, acknowledging both her unexpected path to power and her commitment to continuing the beloved king's legacy. She spoke of her vision for Valenhall's future, emphasizing education, trade expansion, and the strengthening of relationships with neighboring kingdoms. Most importantly, she promised to remain accessible to her people, a pledge that resonated strongly with the assembled crowd. The days following the announcement were filled with intense activity, as the kingdom prepared for an unprecedented transition of power. Foreign ambassadors arrived daily seeking audiences to understand how this change might affect their relationships with Valenhall. Some came with congratulations, others with barely concealed concern about the stability of their trade agreements and treaties. Catherine found herself thrust into a whirlwind of meetings, briefings, and ceremonial preparations. The Master of Protocol, Lord Aldwyn Hastings, worked tirelessly to adapt centuries-old coronation traditions to accommodate a female sovereign. Ancient texts were consulted, and scholars debated the proper forms of address and ceremony that would honor tradition while acknowledging the historic nature of the occasion. Prince William, despite his condition, threw himself into supporting his wife's preparation for queenship. His intimate knowledge of royal protocol and his relationships with key nobles proved invaluable as Catherine navigated the complex political landscape she would soon command. Together, they reviewed dossiers on every major family in the kingdom, studying the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that could either support or challenge her reign. The princess also began working closely with Sir Marcus Aldrich, the kingdom's chancellor, a brilliant strategist who had served King Edmund faithfully for 20 years. Sir Marcus had initially been skeptical of the unprecedented succession, but Catherine's quick grasp of complex political and economic issues soon won his respect and support. One of Catherine's first major challenges came from an unexpected source. The Duchess of Westmarch, Lady Evelyn Blackthorne, who controlled significant agricultural lands and commanded considerable influence among the traditional nobility. Lady Evelyn had publicly questioned whether a woman, particularly one not born to royalty, could effectively command the kingdom's military forces or negotiate with foreign powers from a position of strength. The Duchess had not openly opposed Catherine's coronation, but her pointed questions during a formal dinner at the castle made her concerns clear to everyone present. Catherine had responded with grace but firmness, demonstrating her knowledge of military strategy and her understanding of the delicate balance of power that kept Valenhall's borders secure. The exchange had been watched closely by other nobles, many of whom were taking a wait-and-see approach to the new queen. Catherine understood that her early actions as sovereign would be crucial in establishing her authority and winning the full support of the kingdom's power brokers. As the coronation approached, Catherine also faced the challenge of selecting her royal council. Tradition dictated that certain positions would continue under the new sovereign, but she also had the opportunity to make strategic appointments that would signal her priorities and governing philosophy. The selection of her advisors would send important messages about whether she intended to maintain continuity with King Edmund's policies or chart a new course for the kingdom. The people of Valenhall watched these developments with fascination and growing excitement. Street artists began creating portraits of their future queen, and merchants reported increased sales of blue ribbons and flowers, the colors traditionally associated with the royal house. Children in the capital schools were taught songs about the historic transition, and storytellers in taverns across the kingdom crafted tales about the merchant's daughter who would become queen. Foreign kingdoms watched with equal interest but varying degrees of approval. Some saw opportunity in what they perceived as potential weakness or inexperience. Others recognized that Catherine's background in trade and diplomacy might actually strengthen Valenhall's position in regional negotiations. As this remarkable period of transition continued, Catherine found herself growing into her role with each passing day, while the kingdom held its collective breath, waiting to see how this bold experiment in royal succession would unfold. The great Cathedral of Astoria had witnessed many coronations throughout its 800-year history, but none quite like the ceremony being prepared for Princess Catherine. Master craftsmen worked around the clock to complete modifications to the ancient throne, adjusting its dimensions to accommodate the kingdom's first queen regnant. The crown itself, worn by 43 kings before Edmund, required delicate alterations by the royal jeweler to ensure it would sit properly on Catherine's head during the sacred ceremony. Catherine spent the weeks leading up to her coronation in intensive preparation, studying not just the ceremonial aspects of becoming queen, but immersing herself in the complexities of governing a kingdom. Her days began before dawn with briefings from the royal council, followed by meetings with representatives from every province of Valenhall. She needed to understand the unique challenges facing each region, from the fishing villages along the northern coast to the mining communities in the southern mountains. The princess proved to be a remarkably quick study, absorbing information about tax policies, trade regulations, and military deployments with an efficiency that impressed even her most skeptical advisors. Sir Marcus Aldrich noted in his private journals that Catherine possessed an intuitive understanding of economic principles that served her well in grasping the kingdom's financial situation. Her background in her family's merchant business had given her practical experience in negotiation and resource management that translated surprisingly well to statecraft. However, not all aspects of her preparation went smoothly. The military commanders, led by General Sir Robert Thornfield, expressed private concerns about serving under a queen who had no battlefield experience. While they respected Catherine personally, the tradition of the sovereign leading troops into battle if necessary was deeply ingrained in Valenhol's military culture. Catherine addressed these concerns directly, meeting with each commander individually and demonstrating her thorough understanding of military strategy and her commitment to the kingdom's defense. During one particularly crucial meeting, Catherine surprised the generals by presenting a detailed analysis of Valenhol's border defenses, including specific recommendations for improvements based on her study of recent conflicts in neighboring kingdoms. Her knowledge of supply chains and logistics, gained through her merchant experience, proved especially valuable in military planning. By the end of these sessions, even the most traditional officers began to see potential advantages in having a sovereign who understood the economic foundations of military power. Prince William's role during this period was both supportive and poignant. Despite his declining health, he insisted on participating in as many of Catherine's preparatory meetings as possible, offering insights based on his lifelong training for kingship. His presence served to legitimize Catherine's claim in the eyes of traditionalists who might otherwise have questioned the succession. The prince's gracious acceptance of his circumstances and his obvious pride in his wife's capabilities did much to smooth the transition for those who had expected him to one day wear the crown. The international response to Catherine's impending coronation varied dramatically. The Kingdom of Aldoria, Valenhol's largest trading partner, sent warm congratulations and indicated that they looked forward to continuing their prosperous relationship. The ambassador from Aldoria privately noted that Catherine's commercial background might actually strengthen trade negotiations between their kingdoms. However, the response from the Empire of Drakmor was notably cooler. Emperor Maximus Drakmor had long viewed Valenhol with suspicion, and the prospect of a female sovereign seemed to confirm his belief that the kingdom was abandoning the strong traditions that had made it a formidable neighbor. Intelligence reports suggested that Drakmor might test Valenhol's resolve under its new queen, possibly through increased border tensions or challenges to existing treaties. Catherine was well aware of these international dynamics and spent considerable time with Valenhol's diplomatic corps, reviewing relationships with every neighboring power. She studied the personality profiles of foreign leaders, learning their negotiating styles and understanding the historical context of various agreements and disputes. Her approach combined the practical mindset of a merchant with the strategic thinking required for statecraft. The domestic challenges were equally complex. While the common people had generally embraced the idea of Queen Catherine, some noble families remained skeptical. The most significant opposition came from the Duke of Ravenshollow, Lord Edmund Blackwater, who controlled important iron mines and commanded influence among the more conservative noble houses. Unlike the Duchess of Westmarch's public questioning, Duke Blackwater's opposition was more subtle, but potentially more dangerous. The Duke had begun hosting private gatherings at his estate, ostensibly social events, but actually forums for expressing doubts about the wisdom of the succession change. He never openly criticized Catherine or King Edmund's decision, but he raised questions about precedent and tradition that resonated with nobles who were uncomfortable with such dramatic change. Intelligence reports suggested that these gatherings were growing in frequency and attendance. Catherine decided to address this challenge directly. Rather than confronting the Duke publicly, she arranged a private meeting at Castle Valenhol, inviting him for what appeared to be a routine consultation about mining regulations. During their conversation, she demonstrated extensive knowledge of the iron industry and presented proposals for increasing production efficiency that could benefit his holdings significantly. More importantly, Catherine appealed to the Duke's genuine love for Valenhol, acknowledging his family's long service to the crown and asking for his guidance in navigating the challenges ahead. By the end of their meeting, while Duke Blackwater hadn't become an enthusiastic supporter, he had agreed to give the new queen a fair chance to prove herself. His subsequent comments to other nobles helped diffuse much of the growing opposition. As the coronation date approached, Catherine faced one final major test. A delegation from the neighboring kingdom of Meridia arrived unexpectedly, requesting an audience about a disputed territory along the border. The timing was clearly intentional, designed to test how the future queen would handle her first diplomatic crisis. The dispute involved a valley that had changed hands several times over the centuries, and recent surveys suggested it might contain valuable mineral deposits. Meridia's representatives claimed historical rights to the territory, while Valenhol's position was that current treaty boundaries were clear and binding. Catherine assembled her diplomatic team and spent 3 days in intensive negotiations with the Meridian delegation. She demonstrated remarkable skill in finding common ground while firmly defending Valenhol's interests. The final agreement established a joint commission to conduct thorough surveys of the disputed area, with profits from any mineral extraction to be shared proportionally based on the commission's findings. The success of these negotiations sent a clear message to both domestic and foreign observers that Queen Catherine would be a formidable leader. Foreign ambassadors reported back to their kingdoms that Valenhol's new sovereign possessed both the intelligence and the backbone necessary for effective rule. As the coronation ceremony finally arrived, Catherine felt as prepared as possible for the enormous responsibility she was about to assume. The kingdom watched with anticipation and hope, ready to witness the dawn of a new era in their history. The ancient traditions of Valenhol were about to embrace unprecedented change, and everyone wondered what this remarkable transformation would mean for their future. The morning of the coronation dawned clear and crisp, with golden autumn light streaming through the stained-glass windows of Astoria Cathedral. Citizens had been gathering since before sunrise, filling every available space along the processional route from Castle Valenhol to the cathedral. Banners in the royal colors of blue and gold fluttered from every building, and the air rang with the sound of church bells celebrating the historic day. Inside the castle, Catherine prepared for the ceremony that would transform her from princess to queen with the help of her ladies-in-waiting and the kingdom's most skilled seamstresses. The coronation gown, a masterpiece of silk and intricate embroidery, had been designed to honor both tradition and the unique nature of this succession. The royal blue fabric was embellished with golden threads that formed patterns representing every province of Valenhol, symbolizing her commitment to serving the entire kingdom. The crown itself, modified by the royal jeweler to fit Catherine's head, sat on a cushion of royal velvet nearby. The ancient piece, crafted over 5 centuries ago, contained rubies from Valenhol's own mines and diamonds that had been gifts from allied kingdoms. Today, it would rest upon the head of a queen for the first time in the kingdom's history. Prince William, despite his condition requiring the assistance of a walking stick, insisted on escorting his wife to the cathedral. His presence beside Catherine, as they prepared to leave the castle, served as a powerful symbol of continuity and support. The prince had commissioned special vestments for the occasion, and his bearing remained regal despite the physical challenges he faced. King Edmund, who would formally transfer his authority during the ceremony, spent his final morning as sovereign in quiet reflection. The king had ruled Valenhol through times of war and peace, prosperity and hardship, and now he faced the bittersweet moment of passing his beloved kingdom into new hands. His private prayers that morning focused not on his own legacy, but on asking for wisdom and strength for the remarkable woman who would succeed him. The processional from castle to cathedral was unlike anything Valenhol had ever witnessed. Catherine rode in an open carriage so that her subjects could see their new queen, acknowledging the cheering crowds with waves and warm smiles. Children tossed flower petals into the street before her carriage, and adults called out blessings and good wishes for her reign. Foreign dignitaries lined the cathedral steps, representing kingdoms and empires from across the known world. Their presence validated Catherine's legitimacy on the international stage, even as some watched with curiosity to see how this unprecedented succession would unfold. The Emperor of Aldoria had sent his own crown prince as a representative, a gesture of particular respect that did not go unnoticed by other observers. Inside the cathedral, the ancient ceremony began with traditional prayers and hymns that had been sung at royal coronations for centuries. However, certain elements had been modified to acknowledge the historic nature of the occasion. The Archbishop of Astoria, His Grace Benedict Morhart, had worked with royal scholars to ensure that every aspect of the ceremony would be both legally binding and spiritually meaningful. When the moment came for King Edmund to formally transfer his authority, his words carried the weight of centuries of tradition combined with the unprecedented nature of what was occurring. "By the grace of God and the ancient laws of our realm," he declared, "I pass the crown of Valenhol to one who has proven worthy through wisdom, compassion, and unwavering dedication to our people." As the crown was placed upon Catherine's head, a profound silence filled the cathedral before erupting into triumphant cheers. The new Queen Catherine I of Valenhol had officially begun her reign, and the kingdom had entered uncharted territory in its long and storied history. Catherine's first act as queen was to kneel before the altar and swear the traditional oath of sovereignty, pledging to defend Valenhol, protect her subjects, and rule with justice and mercy. Her voice carried clearly throughout the cathedral as she spoke the ancient words, investing them with new meaning for a new era. The celebration following the coronation lasted 3 days and included representatives from every corner of the kingdom. Queen Catherine made a point of meeting personally with delegations from the remotest provinces, listening to their concerns and assuring them that her reign would not favor the capital at the expense of rural areas. These personal interactions helped establish the tone for her rule and demonstrated the accessible leadership style she intended to maintain. However, even as the kingdom celebrated, Queen Catherine was already facing the first challenges of her reign. A message had arrived from the Empire of Drakmor, questioning certain trade agreements and suggesting that the change in sovereignty might require renegotiation of existing treaties. Emperor Maximus was clearly testing the new queen's resolve, probably hoping to exploit what he perceived as a period of weakness during the transition. Catherine's response was swift and decisive. She dispatched Sir Marcus Aldrich as her personal envoy to Drakmor with a message that was both diplomatic and firm. The Queen acknowledged the Emperor's concerns while making it clear that Valenhall considered all existing treaties to remain in full effect. She also included subtle references to Valenhall's military capabilities and trade relationships that served as gentle warnings against any attempts to take advantage of the succession. The domestic challenges were equally demanding. Queen Catherine had to navigate the complex web of noble relationships while establishing her own authority as sovereign. Her first major decision involved appointing new members to the Royal Council, a process that required careful consideration of both competence and political balance. She surprised many observers by retaining most of King Edmund's advisors while adding several new voices to the council. Her most controversial appointment was Lady Sarah Brightheart, a brilliant economist from a minor noble family who had been serving as an advisor on trade policy. Some traditional nobles questioned whether someone of such humble birth deserved a seat on the Royal Council, but Catherine's decision proved to be prescient, as Lady Sarah's expertise became crucial in the complex negotiations that would soon follow. Queen Catherine also faced the delicate task of defining Prince William's role in the new regime. Despite his health challenges, the prince remained a valuable advisor, with intimate knowledge of royal protocol and noble relationships. Catherine created the position of royal consort for her husband, giving him formal status in the government while ensuring that his contributions would be recognized and utilized. The first weeks of Queen Catherine's reign were marked by a careful balance between innovation and tradition. She maintained the ceremonial aspects of monarchy that her subjects expected while introducing practical reforms in areas where her expertise could benefit the kingdom. Her background in commerce proved particularly valuable in reviewing trade policies and identifying opportunities for economic growth. International recognition of the new queen came gradually but steadily. The Kingdom of Meridia, which had tested her diplomatic skills before the coronation, sent formal congratulations and expressed interest in expanding trade relationships. Other neighbors followed suit, recognizing that Queen Catherine's reign was not just legitimate but potentially beneficial to regional stability and prosperity. As her first month as queen concluded, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from merchant's daughter to sovereign. The challenges ahead were enormous, but she faced them with growing confidence and the support of a kingdom that was beginning to believe in the promise of this remarkable new chapter in their history. 6 months into Queen Catherine's reign, Valenhall had begun to show clear signs of the transformation that would define her rule. The Queen's practical approach to governance, combined with her innovative policies and diplomatic skill, had not only stabilized the kingdom during its unprecedented transition, but had actually strengthened its position both domestically and internationally. One of Catherine's most significant early achievements was the establishment of the Royal Education Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to bring literacy and practical skills to even the remotest villages of Valenhall. Drawing on her belief that an educated population was essential for the kingdom's long-term prosperity, she had convinced the noble houses to fund new schools in exchange for tax incentives related to their agricultural and mining operations. The program's success exceeded even Catherine's optimistic projections.
The program's success.
Village schools reported enrollment levels far beyond expectations, with entire families often attending evening classes together. The curriculum combined traditional subjects like reading and mathematics with practical skills such as improved farming techniques, basic medical knowledge, and trade skills that could boost local economies. Foreign observers took particular note of these educational reforms. The ambassador from Aldoria wrote to his king that Queen Catherine's emphasis on education was creating a more skilled workforce that could significantly enhance Valenhall's economic competitiveness. This intelligence prompted several neighboring kingdoms to begin developing their own educational initiatives, inadvertently creating a regional renaissance in learning and innovation. Queen Catherine's diplomatic successes were equally impressive. The challenge from Emperor Maximus of Dracmor had been resolved through a series of negotiations that actually strengthened Valenhol's position. Rather than simply defending existing treaties, Catherine had proposed new trade arrangements that benefited both kingdoms, while establishing clear protocols for resolving future disputes. The key breakthrough came when Catherine personally travelled to Dracmor for a summit meeting with the emperor. Her decision to visit his capital rather than insisting on neutral ground demonstrated both confidence and respect that impressed the traditionally minded emperor. During their negotiations, Catherine's detailed knowledge of both kingdoms' economic interests allowed her to craft agreements that provided mutual benefits while addressing Dracmor's concerns about regional stability. The success of this diplomatic mission enhanced Catherine's reputation throughout the region and established her as a leader to be taken seriously. More importantly, it demonstrated to her own nobles that their queen could hold her own in high-stakes international negotiations, silencing many of the remaining doubters within Valenhol's aristocracy. Prince William's role as royal consort had evolved into an essential part of the kingdom's governance structure. Despite his health challenges, his deep knowledge of noble family histories and relationships proved invaluable in managing the complex political dynamics within Valenhol. Catherine relied heavily on his counsel, and their partnership became a model for how personal and political relationships could strengthen rather than complicate royal authority. The prince had also taken on special responsibility for military affairs, an area where his formal training complemented Catherine's strategic thinking. Together, they had implemented reforms that modernized Valenhol's military forces while respecting the traditions that made them effective. The introduction of new training programs and improved equipment had boosted morale throughout the ranks, while Catherine's emphasis on fair compensation for soldiers had strengthened their loyalty to the crown. However, Queen Catherine's most ambitious project was the Grand Trade Expansion, a comprehensive plan to establish new commercial relationships across the known world. Her vision extended far beyond traditional neighboring kingdoms to include distant lands that had previously been considered too remote for profitable trade. The expansion began with the establishment of a royal trading company that would operate under the crown's protection while generating revenue for the kingdom. Catherine personally recruited the most skilled merchants and navigators from across Valenhol, offering them partnership stakes in ventures that promised both adventure and profit. The first expeditions exceeded all expectations, returning with exotic goods, new agricultural techniques, and most importantly, detailed maps of trade routes that could support regular commerce. These successes attracted merchants from other kingdoms who wanted to participate in Valenhol's expanding trade network, further enhancing the kingdom's economic growth and international influence. The domestic impact of these economic policies was dramatic. Tax revenues increased significantly, allowing Catherine to fund infrastructure improvements that had been delayed for years due to budget constraints. New roads connected remote provinces to major markets, while improved ports accommodated the larger ships needed for long-distance trade. Perhaps most importantly, these economic gains were shared broadly throughout Valenhol society. Catherine's policies ensured that prosperity reached beyond the noble houses and merchant families to include farmers, craftsmen, and laborers whose work supported the expanding economy. This broad-based improvement in living standards strengthened popular support for the Queen and created a sense of optimism about the kingdom's future. The transformation was not without challenges. Some traditional nobles struggled to adapt to Catherine's more merit-based approach to appointments and her expectation that they justify their privileges through meaningful service to the kingdom. The Duchess of Westmarch, who had initially questioned Catherine's fitness to rule, became one of her strongest supporters after seeing the practical benefits of the new policies for her own agricultural lands. Duke Blackwater of Ravenshollow remained somewhat skeptical, but had ceased his subtle opposition after Catherine's successful expansion of mining operations brought significant profits to his holdings. His grudging respect for the Queen's practical achievements had helped convince other conservative nobles that change could be beneficial rather than threatening. As Catherine's first year as Queen approached, foreign kingdoms were beginning to recognise that Valenhol under her rule had become a more formidable neighbour than it had been under traditional male monarchs. Her combination of diplomatic skill, economic innovation, and military modernisation created a new model for effective governance that other rulers were studying with both interest and concern. The kingdom itself had been transformed from a traditional monarchy focused primarily on maintaining stability into a dynamic state that actively pursued growth and improvement. Catherine's reign represented not just a change in leadership, but a fundamental evolution in how Valenhol understood its role in the wider world. Looking toward the future, Queen Catherine faced the exciting challenge of building on these early successes while navigating the inevitable complications that would arise as her innovations disrupted traditional patterns of power and influence. The merchant's daughter, who had become queen, had proven that effective leadership could emerge from unexpected sources, and her reign promised to inspire changes far beyond the borders of Valenhall itself. The kingdom that had once worried about the unprecedented nature of Catherine's succession now looked forward with confidence to a future shaped by her vision, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to their welfare. The crown of Valenhall rested securely on the head of a queen who had not only met the enormous challenges of her position, but had exceeded every expectation, proving that sometimes the most dramatic changes can lead to the most remarkable achievements.